The autocratic and dictatorial face of the BJP, the ruling dispensation, the government was in full show in each House of Parliament over the past few days. It was on show in the most brazen, undemocratic and unparliamentary expunction of several of Shri Rahul Gandhi's remarks, several of the LOP Shri Mallikarjun Kharge's remarks, some of the remarks of Mr. Jairam Ramesh, followed of course by the suspension on Friday of Ms. Rajani Patil. The BJP government, we submit, is moving towards establishing an authoritarian dominance in Parliament by terrifying, terrorizing, tormenting and tyrannizing the opposition. Instead of wanting to run Parliament through consensus, collaboration and concordance, they are wanting chaos, clash and conflict. You have all heard in the public domain the speeches in Parliament. They are available in the public domain. You would have seen the text also. My short point is that not a word therein can justify the use of the power of expunction. You can ask and see for yourself, is there a single word of unparliamentary language, any expletive, abuse, debasement of any institution, any objectionable word or phrase, defamatory, indecent, unparliamentary or undignified? Not a word. Shri Rahul Gandhi and Shri Kharge spoke extremely politely but firmly based on factual narratives. In fact, it is amusing, supremely ironical, that some of the expunged portions are questions which they asked. I don't know how you can expunge questions. The Honorable Speaker and the Honorable Chairperson of the two houses respectively are constitutional office holders. They are custodians and defenders of freedom of speech inside the House. And this free speech is a fundamental pillar of Indian democracy, especially within the temple of democracy, namely Parliament. Without a robust shield provided by the presiding officers of each house, the spirit of healthy parliamentary discussion and debate will perish. Freedom of speech is the foundation of our constitution, and it is much more so within the legislature, where it is a protected species, specially protected. There are constitutional articles about it. Each one of us has to defend the right of free speech within Parliament. And if the two houses of Parliament cease to have space for free speech, then sadly, friends, we cannot call ourselves a democracy. Unless free, frank and fearless discussion is allowed within the two houses, democracy and the whole principle of free speech is irreversibly imperiled. Parliament can hardly remain what Nehru called the grand inquest of the nation if free speech, which leads to fearless discussion, is throttled. Expunction is not justified by any of the relevant rules applicable. You can take Rule 380 for the Lok Sabha, you can take a similar rule in the Rajya Sabha. Far from applying on the merits, it doesn't even apply at all. The language doesn't apply. Because none of the words, as I said, are objectionable, unparliamentary, indecent, defamatory, abusive, etc., which is what the rule seeks to control. This government, we believe, this ruling party is the most curb, control and command-freak sarkar which this nation has ever seen. Friends, I now turn to another aspect. On 10th of February, that is a day before yesterday, the Rajya Sabha witnessed yet another example, yet another low in a series of unprecedented highs of undemocratic behavior and sad precedents created at the behest of this autocratic government. And because of that, the entire opposition, cutting across the political spectrum, had no option but to walk out on Friday. Ms. Rajani Patil, Member of Parliament, in a 15-minute sudden surgical strike, was suspended for alleged video recording of House proceedings during the Honorable Prime Minister's speech. No show cause, no prior notice, no prior intimation was given to her. Secondly, now mark these points, friends, Rule 257 was invoked. On the face of it, it is textually, word-wise, totally inapplicable. You can just pick it up and read it. It says that you may suspend, and I repeat, for persistent and willful obstruction of the House. Mark the words, persistent and willful obstruction. The idea is that if the running of the House by the chair is made impossible by your conduct, by your obstruction, then I may consider suspending you. Now, Ms. Patil has not dealt with the facts alleged against her for the simple reason that she has had no opportunity to do so, no show cause, no intimation. But assuming without accepting that any video was made, it cannot fall within the domain of persistent and willful obstruction of the House necessitating suspension. Therefore, the rule is completely inapplicable. Thirdly, at the worst, it is a one-time act, a first-time act. And persistent and willful not being there, it can at best lead to a warning, cannot lead to suspension. Fourthly, the cart is put before the horse in the eagerness of this government to create sensationalism, to humiliate a member of parliament. The normal sequence is inverted and put on its head. The normal sequence of what, friends? Of natural justice. You are saying that we will inquire into it through the Privileges Committee. Before inquiry, before notice, before commencement of inquiry, before hearing Ms. Patil, before any proceeding, you first take the decision to suspend. If at all, it should have happened at the end of the inquiry. Therefore, all elementary notions of fair play were thrown to the winds. Fifthly, the Honorable Prime Minister spoke for over 75 or 90 minutes. It cannot be said in any stretch of imagination that he was obstructed in terms of delivery of the speech. There might have been interruptions and comments, but there was no obstruction rendering the functioning of the House impossible. Sixthly, there have been many incidents in the past like this by members of the present ruling party where either no action was taken or at the most warning sufficed. The present immediate suspension before starting an inquiry is therefore disproportionate, excessive, and actuated purely by malice at the behest of this government. Seventhly, the Honourable Chair ought not to have acted on this one-sided and unilateral proposal of the government without even initiating a preliminary inquiry and waiting for its report. And eighthly, as was pointed out in the House, you have to simply look at the proceedings of 9th of February. There was a complete biased, selective and one-sided approach by Sansad TV. Sansad TV was acting under the misconception that it's the spokesperson of the government or a part of a Sarkari department. The opposition was not given an infinitesimal fraction of the coverage given to the Treasury benches during the speeches on 9th. It was virtually blacked out during the long speech of the Honorable Prime Minister. And this is yet another low of partisanship which has been achieved on the directions of this dictatorial government. Friends, in the end, I would say, with great respect but with total firmness, that such brazen, unconstitutional approaches, such blatant partisanship, such uncaring decimation of rules and convention, such destruction of democratic values, such debasement of legislative proceedings deserves our strongest collective condemnation.